Thanks, G. I'm Josh, recovered alcoholic. So if you see me looking off, it's because I got my phone right here and I got the big TV behind it. So I'm just trying something different, um, trying something a little bit different. Um, I'm Josh, alcoholic, man. And I just want to thank Jeannie and Steven and Eric and everybody who's been involved with this meeting um, since it first started. I don't know if I've ever like given a talk at this meeting before, but I had the privilege of helping start this meeting. But you guys have been making it go for years now, dude. And it's really cool if you think about it. At least it is to me. There's the Zoom meetings that started in 2020 that are still going. I don't know of a whole lot, man. I'm sure there's some out there, but like this one's still going, man. It's pretty cool. I think that's awesome. That's a testimony to I think you guys commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I do have a home group, and I see some of my home group members here. The Grace group, and Jeannie talked about where we meet and when we meet, and that's very important to me. I've got a sponsor, and I work with other men, and it requires me to work the entire program of Alcoholics Anonymous to be able to stay a little bit sane today, right? Um, I want to share with you my experience and how the program of Alcoholics Anonymous shows up in my life. Um, in a way that you could duplicate it. There's some people that have been here around here for a long time. There's some people that might be here that's new. Um, I want to be able to say some things tonight from my experience that is an adequate presentation that you can take out here and duplicate. And for a long time, I didn't understand what my job was in AA. But before we do any of that, it never fails, guys. Never fails that when I get ready to do a talk or I get ready to go to Clearview on Sundays, I have a wonderful opportunity to practice a 10th step. Okay. Right. So I was able to call a couple guys literally like within an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours of the meeting because I'm appalled at how I continue to show up at life sometimes. I could be on the spiritual cloud and then something just not catch me right. And before I know it, man, I'm in need of a 10th step. And for many, 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 many years in AA, I would allow that to cause me to show up dishonest, um, or dishonest, or not make commitments because I couldn't handle it, man. And so this 10th step has been tremendously helpful to me over the last 5 years. I've been in AA, in and out of AA for 25 years. I've been practicing a 10th step for about 5 years. So I'm a slow learner. But I promised Stacy that I'd tell this joke, and most of you have probably already heard it before. And I'm probably going to butcher it like I always do, but who cares, man? We're on Zoom. This is going to be awesome. So there's this gentleman who is going to his doctor, and on the way to the doctor's office, he's thinking to himself, I need to ask my doctor what I can do to help my wife because I think maybe she's hard of hearing. So I need to ask him what I can do. So he gets to the doctor's office, and he's like, Doc, my wife, I think maybe she's losing her hearing, man. Bless her heart, and I want to help her. How do I find out if she's losing her hearing or not? He says, I've got just the thing for you. You're going to need to go home and you need to get about 20 feet behind her and ask her a question. She doesn't hear you, walk 5 feet further. She doesn't hear you, walk 5 feet further. Keep asking the questions and keep walking 5 feet until she can hear you. Then you can get a better idea of what kind of hearing loss we're talking about, right? And he's like, yeah, why didn't I think of that? That's a great idea. Great idea. So he thinks it's gonna be great. He's gonna get home. He's gonna help his wife. Men, you know what happens. You think you're gonna help your spouse, right? Never works out like that, does it? So he gets home and he can't wait to get inside. And he gets in there and she's in the kitchen. She's doing something productive, right? And he walks up behind her and he kind of measures it out. He eyeballs it. He says, 20 feet, and he says, hey, baby, what's for supper? Nothing. And you know the story. He walks up about 5 feet. Hey, baby, what we having for dinner tonight? Nothing. Walks about 5 feet further. Hey, sweetheart, what's for supper tonight? Nothing. Now he's like, dang, this is getting pretty bad. So he decides to move up a little bit further. He's like 5 feet behind her. He says, hey, man, what's for supper? And she just turns around and says, lasagna for the fourth time. And that's where you guys applause and laugh. And it took me a minute to get that joke when I first heard it because I got a problem with perception and hearing what I want to hear. And I brought that into Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, long time. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I was able to really hear and see what my problem was. So tonight, man, if I say or do anything, if I say anything that doesn't go along with how you do things in AA, that's okay. I'm not looking to poop on anybody's experience. I'm going to talk about my experience, man, and what worked for me. And for a long time, this design for living that the big book talks about, I wasn't practicing. I was operating out of my design for living. So I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit. I want to read on the bottom of page 17. This is the portion that I missed out on page 17, because I came in and you guys were talking about how you drank and all the problems and all the stuff and the trauma and the drama you've been through, and I can relate to all that, man. And it talks about that on page 17 in that middle paragraph, man. We're talking about how we've been through everything together, and that's what, man, we feel good about that, right? And that keeps us, we've got a bond, man, and I think that's awesome. But that's as far as I ever got with that. I didn't really pay attention to the tremendous fact that for every one of us is that we've discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. So I paid attention to the trauma and the drama. I paid attention to how you drank. And if you didn't drink like me or there was differences, I really didn't listen to you. So like excluded a lot of people, because when I came in, I was 18, 19 years old, and most of you people were old, and most of you people weren't like me because I was different, and so I really didn't hear a whole lot of stuff because I was looking at the differences. I wasn't looking at, the allergy and the mental obsession. But that was enough to keep me there for a little while. But, if you're a student of the book, it talks about the AA message must have depth and weight. And so I don't know, off and on my entire career in AA, I wasn't pulled by a message of depth and weight. I would hear things that I really liked. I would hear things about stories where people had went through a lot and they made it through without drinking. And that impressed me, but I would find a reason to leave because like this was kind of getting boring. And that's kind of how I showed up in AA for a long time. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago that some people reached me at a level that I haven't been reached before. And I think that everybody in my life, and Miss Pauline's on here, thank goodness, man, they have shown up in a way. They're always trying to help me. Alcoholics Anonymous showed up in 2000 in my life, the year 2000. Every good thing that I have in my life today, and that's not an exaggeration, is a result of you guys. I didn't know how to communicate, still have problems with that. I didn't know how to be a friend. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to like be responsible, any of that kind of stuff. You guys taught me how to do all of that. So I'm deeply indebted to that. I came into AA in the year 2000 after being in end-stage alcoholism probably for 4 or 5 years. I don't know. I mean, I didn't really journal this stuff, but, taking a drink at the age of 12, 13 years old, doing some outside issues, some other substances, my alcoholism took off, really quickly. And I want to encourage anybody that has a difference in their story than mine, don't really pay attention to that. Pay attention to the physical allergy or the mental obsession. Pay attention to when you put alcohol in your body, did you have to have more? Pay attention to the stories about, hey, I tried to put it down forever and for good, and I couldn't, and I found an excuse to go drink and use again. Those are the things I should have been paying attention to years ago, but I wasn't. I grew up in a great household, religious background, no alcoholics in my immediate family. My uncle passed away from alcoholism about 5 years ago. Anyway, I had a pretty good childhood, man. I had a loving father and mother. I was what they called shy growing up. And what I found from working at AA is the fact that I was just very, 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 very self-consumed. Way more than I am now, believe it or not. And sometimes it amazes me about how self-consumed I was even then. But I didn't know it, man. I just got my feelings hurt real easy. Didn't want to get embarrassed, so I wouldn't ever ask questions. I wouldn't participate in things because, what if I made a fool out of myself? Um, if I was good at something, because I was kind of a big kid, so like with basketball or something that like a big body, I would excel in for a little while. That guy's he's big, let's put him on our team kind of thing. I would do that kind of stuff. But if I wasn't immediately good at it or anything, I'm not going to do it, man. Because what if I fail? Um, my best, I don't know why I'm sharing with you this, but like how I showed up as a kid was, um, I always wanted what you had, but I didn't want to do the work to get it, man. Like I got one of my childhood best friends who I talk to regularly today lives in the area. I was always jealous of him, man. And he was a guy that wasn't afraid of any kind of failure, wasn't afraid of taking chances. And that was always me, And I would always criticize him and, behind his back and judge him and talk about him because I, I didn't have what he had, man. And I wasn't willing to do the work that he was willing to do to get there. And that's how I showed up. That's how I showed up in AA. Fast forward, my mom dies of cancer in 1989. That was a pivotal moment in my life. Looking back, I didn't know this then, but I had some religious training, and what I heard those people tell me was that if you ask anything in a certain name, that you would get it. And so obviously I asked for God to heal my mom, and He didn't, and something just kind of clicked. I don't think I had the conscious thought. Maybe I did. I lost some faith. What little bit of faith that I had, I lost it, um, and I began to just make some poor choices after that. I didn't want to feel any feelings. I began to get into my mom's old cancer medications, trying to feel different. That led to me to begin drinking at a young age, quit all the things that were good for me, got some DUIs, had a suicide attempt. Some of y'all been there before, all the things that are indicative of alcoholism, or their signs and symptoms. And that's what I thought was what was gonna keep me in AA when I first got here, man. If you did stuff like that, and when I'd hear people talk about the stuff I did, I'd perk up and listen to them. Anyway, and I don't want to stay there, man. I don't want to stay there. Y'all, a lot of y'all have heard that story pre the first time I was sober, those 11 years, and I want to say tonight, I respect everyone who has a lot of time. It takes a lot of work to stay sober for a long time, man. And my time alone will not keep me sober, man. My time alone will not keep me sober, and I learned that. I learned that, and I think I heard that for a long time, but I wasn't practicing spiritual principles. I believed I was different, and I came into AA, and just like I came in anywhere else, scared, wanting to fit in. And so I came through AA in a treatment center in the year 2000, and didn't really want to get sober. And y'all keep my time going here because I don't really have a clock. Oh, crap. I don't have a clock here. I pushed the wrong button. So if we get close, Jeannie, just kind of raise your hand and I'll shut up. But I come into AA through a local treatment center here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Met some folks, got a white chip. Y'all were talking my language as far as how I drank, and it kind of felt good, man. I've always wanted to be a part of something bigger than me. I think looking back, I was always looking for that purpose. And then when I would drink and I would get around my buddies or my friends, you had that closeness, you had that camaraderie, man. It felt good. So I've always sought that, and so I got to treatment, I got to AA, and I started having those feelings again. I felt like I wanted to be a part of something. And I guess about 6 months into it, I'm going to lots of meetings. They told me to do 90 and 90, and I'm going to be a good student because that's how I show up. I want to impress you. And by the way, when I get in these meetings like this tonight, I want to say all the right things to heal all the people. And then this God consciousness that you guys have taught me about comes in and says, dude, just be honest. Tell the truth. That's all you got to do. So I'm trying to do that tonight. And I do like 87 and 90. I do a lot of meetings. But I'm going to these meetings, and you guys aren't welcoming with the red carpet. I'm feeling like I felt before treatment or when I was in high school or whatever else. I just don't fit in, man. And a cool thing happened. I was at a convention that year. I'm sure somebody in here was there or part of it. Maybe it was Pauline. It was at the IP Casino, Imperial Palace. And my first sponsor, Bert G, was there, and he had about a year and a half more sober than me. And that's what I needed to hear. And he was saying some things that he had a message of depth and weight, man. Like And I went up to him and said I was struggling. He said, "Yeah, I know you are. You've been playing AA, man." He said, "You need to get out of those treatment center meetings." And I kind of got offended. So what do you mean treatment center? He's like, "You need to get away from your friends up there in those treatment center meetings, and you need to get in some real AA, you know." And I'm so glad that he told me that, man, because you know I was, man. And this is not a knock against well-meaning people at all, dude, because I've said it too. I heard AA for me was like me showing up in the church. It was like I heard people talking out two sides of their mouth, man. You know, at church they say, you know, at least mine, um, God loves you no matter what. The other breath they're saying you better answer for your judgment or your sins or whatever, you know. And so I come to AA and I hear people say, um, put the plug in the jug, you know, just don't drink no matter what, you know. And then in the book saying, you know, you lost the power of choice, man. So like I like the idea of just don't drink no matter what and exert my willpower. So that's what I kind of did. I gravitated towards some of that, you know. Um, Bert was like, "Dude, you're getting sicker in there, so you need to come down here." So anyway, he grabs me up, shows me what true love really is, man. Did some things that I'd never had experienced before from another man, you know, would come pick me up and drive me home and tell me he loved me. And this is big cowboy dude. And I'm a young punk, man. I'm like, dude, you know, I've never experienced this before. What's the catch, you know? And then he showed me he loved me, you know, and he would tell me some of his like junk, you know. And I tell him some of my junk, man. And I started feeling like I was a part of the human race, man. I started feeling some of that stuff that was talked about in the book about feeling like part of God's creation. And that's probably as far as I got, really. Um, you know, uh, after a while, I want to tell the truth here. What I heard you guys say was, Josh, you're the most special person on earth because you got sober when you were young. That's what I heard. You know, I don't know what people. I started feeling special because people were patting me on the back, and you're so lucky you got it young, man. And what I've learned since then, it doesn't matter if you're 17 or you're 77, man. My alcoholism was just as bad at 17 as yours was at 77, and I started believing the hype, man. I was special, you know. And I looking back, I wasn't working a daily spiritual program to keep my ego at bay. Um, so my ego became young Josh, sober at 18. Um, that's kind of who I became. And you know, I didn't want to keep going to these meetings. You know, and my sponsor at the time was a AA hero and was going around sober up South Mississippi and doing all this stuff. And all his time was in AA, right? And I thought to myself, that's great for him, but man, I got a life to live, dude. I'm young, dude. He's old, washed up, you know, living in his mom's house. And, you know, this is really being honest, man. You know, and looking back, I'm like, damn, that guy, he was linked up, dude. I mean, if you ever get a chance to sit down and talk to Bert G and him tell you his story, like really tell you his story, you'd be amazed, man. Like the age he was at when he lost everything, come to AA and the stuff he went through and the sponsor he got, it's amazing. So just remember that if you ever get a chance to meet him, he was going through some stuff and living out this program. And I didn't see any of that. I just saw this guy doing a lot of AA work, not getting to have a lot of fun, you know. And I wanted to live life. You know, I was still young, you know. AA is for people who have burnt their life to the ground. They ain't got nothing else to do, right? And so I began to do the things that I thought we're supposed to do when you're sober and you're young, you know. Um, get a job, get your license back, which all that stuff happened. And not drinking really helped me get all that stuff, man. You know, I wasn't as depressed. I started getting some things. I actually started going to school, went to college, got a college degree, and you know, got some jobs, worked at the local treatment center, did all the things that you hear people do. And um, man, I found a wife and picked her out. And none of this included me actually seeking out what God wanted me to do. You know, because I came into AA with the same problem a lot of people I hear have is I got a problem with God, and that's not true. That's not true. I had never really asked myself who God was for me. You know, I just heard people talk about God. I didn't like that, so I dismissed the whole idea entirely. Right, just like the book said. But I never cared to really pay attention to what you guys were trying to teach me in that book. So I never really grew spiritually. You know, if that makes any sense. I just came in, got some time, the amends process that I did early on, that one pass through was kind of like my family, and that wasn't, that wasn't that big a deal because your family's got to love you most of the time, and I never felt like it was that hard. Just came real easy, and I went to a lot of meetings where they would say, we'll love you till you love yourself, and hold hands, and real soft and feely, man. And I dug that because that was easy for me. I liked, and I don't know, man. Some of you might not know, but I am a soft kind of feeling guy. I like to be coddled. I like to be told everything's going to be okay, Josh. That I really like that, man. My initial reaction when somebody tells me the truth is like, whoa, whoa, that's kind of serious, And I don't gravitate toward, or I didn't gravitate towards that as much back then. And so, like, when Bert got me into these literature meetings, man, it really kind of caught me by surprise. But I kind of started liking it, and it carried me through. And a lot of good stuff was happening, but I really wasn't growing. But we would go to the beach group every Monday night on the coast, and there was a lot of great sobriety in there that I was just really not paying a whole lot of attention to. And slowly but surely, life started happening, and I got married. I started planning my life. I started arranging my life to suit myself, like it says in How It Works. And I'd find myself talking to Spence every now and then, and he would tell me things like I was selfish. And I would think to myself, I'm not selfish. I'd give anybody the shirt off my back. What I didn't realize, what he was trying to teach me was that I was my biggest obstacle. My thoughts, my ideas, how I needed things to be okay was my problem. What I heard him say was, everything in your life's your fault. Everything that's happened to you is your fault. So that's not what he was telling me. That's not what he was telling me. I was hearing something completely different than what he was telling me. He was trying to show me what this book was telling me. So I slowly but surely just edged out of AA, man. I don't know when it was, man. I wish I could tell you a specific date, but as the years passed and the degrees doubled, and the kids came, and I had to get different jobs, because once I get that new job, everything's going to be all right, right? And once I get that place, everything's going to be okay. Once I get that new relationship, everything's going to be okay. And so I found myself pretty dry in 2011. I had not been practicing spiritual principles. I'd stepped out on my life. I was living dishonestly, because I was hearing in meetings, and this is not a blame on the meeting, but I had heard before that, this is about progress, not perfection. And what you guys meant was it's about spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. What I heard is I can do anything that I want to in AA as long as I just don't drink. Because I heard somebody say that. Just don't drink no matter what. Just don't drink no matter what you do. You can lie, cheat, steal, be dishonest. Just don't drink. What I didn't know then was that's impossible for a real alcoholic. Because that level of dishonesty, that level of living that double life is eventually going to catch up with me, And I found that true of me in, I guess, what was that, Easter 2012. Hadn't thought about a drink that day, had not been in AA for a long time, was in a church service, I actually played Peter. I had a long monologue, very impressive, by the way. I was very impressed with myself. And people told me about it too, and I was very impressed. Went home, went to bed, put my kids to sleep. Woke up in the middle of the night sometime, had a real bad cough. It was the Easter season, and the hot weather and the cold weather kind of combined, and made had some respiratory problems. And the thought hit me suddenly, just like the book talks about. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind, Josh, you need to go downstairs and take your few sips of that hydrocodone medication that your son's got because he broke his leg. Don't drink the whole thing. Just take a few sips, and that'll get rid of your respiratory problems, and you can work because you're a great provider. You need to provide for your family, and blah, 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 blah. The mental obsession had come back years ago, I think. But I had been playing the tape through for a while. I've been trying to just don't drink no matter what. Truth be told, I'd been going, and my wife at the time had kept vodka at the house, and I'd go smell the vodka. What was I doing? And I think I did that for years before that. So I go downstairs and swig the whole bottle. I'm off on a year-long relapse. So page 24 came true for me. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. I did not understand that because of me coming to AA, that was a signal that I'd lost the power of choice to drink. If I had the power of choice to drink, I wouldn't need help, I wouldn't need help. So I didn't come into AA thinking that I would have to practice a spiritual program in order not to drink. What I thought that I was going to come into AA, admit that I was an alcoholic, that I had the physical allergy, that was going to be enough. Go to lots of meetings, hang out with lots of folks, develop a reputation, all that stuff, and that was going to be enough, because that's how I learned. That's how I learned in school. I was taught to memorize things. I was able to parrot things, and that's what I did, man. And I never really had any kind of internal change, and I still struggle with that today, man. Implementing change, and I guess the reason that is because I don't have the power to change. I heard it said one time that AA is about all it's about is power, lack of power, and where is the power, and come to find out, God's got the power, and I've got to take these steps regularly to be able to access that deal. How simple is that, man? Um, but I didn't learn that, So I come back in AA after a year-long relapse because I thought that it was a good idea. No, I was I was living dishonestly. My wife at the time found my stash, um, threatened to take my kids away from me. So I run back into AA again, like we do, like we do. And what time are we looking like? How am I looking, Jeannie?
You got 20 minutes.
Perfect. So run back into AA, and because my life's in the pooper, and do all the same things I was doing before. Go to lots of meetings. And again, man, when you're new, please go to lots of meetings. Please go to lots of meetings. But I just want to say this, man. For me, meetings alone will not treat my alcoholism. Period. I also heard it said one time, and I like this. AA doesn't need zealots, but we sure do need some people with zeal. We need some Derek's and some Eric's and some Jeannie's and some Stevens and some Sundays. We need some people in AA that are willing to step up and tell the truth, through their experience. We need I need some people to tell me the truth in my life. I need some people to tell me what this book's saying. So anyway, I run back into AA, do some step work, and get sober again. 3 months into it, my now ex-wife, files for divorce, restraining order, takes my kids. I think it's the end of the world. That's the first real tragedy or kind of negative situation that I ever faced sober, right? And so I'm reaching for this power, and I don't have it. I'm going to lots of meetings. I'm spewing all my stuff, and you guys are helping me. And about a year into sobriety, I've been fighting a divorce, get my kids back. I had been living dishonestly for a while, and it caught up with me. It caught up with me, and I got arrested at a year sober on the job. And man, that was a wake up call, and my life flashed before my eyes in the back of that cop car, man, because Josh had built this life. He had built this life for what was that, almost 33 years, and it was gone, split second, just like that. And I can remember sitting in the back of that car. It's like, it's over with. It's over with, man. At a year sober, my life's over. So I bond out. I survive jail, and I'm not a jail guy, I'm just not, And I find myself on the phone with Miss Pauline, and man, I've told this story to her a bunch, man. She was so pivotal for me at this time in my life. Her and Bert, people like, I didn't really know Jeannie at that time, but people like them were just showing up like you guys do, man. And I'm out of jail 3 days or a day or so, and I went from up here to down here, and I just got a job scraping, algae off the floor of a flower nursery, and my ego's tattered, and everybody thinks I'm a monster, and it's wild, man. And I'm on the phone with Miss Pauline, telling her how the cabbage and how it's for me, and all this stuff, man. It's not my fault, blah blah blah. And she references, and I don't know if I can't remember if she did this on purpose. I bet she did, but I don't know. But she referenced page 63, and she said, "Josh, are you free?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Do you still get to see your kids?" And from a miracle of God, I'm still seeing my kids. "Do you have a job?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." "Are you sober?" "Yes, ma'am." And I had all these things. And she said, "What else do you need?" And that kind of angered me, if I'm being honest. And I was kind of angry at her. I didn't let her know that because I love Miss Paul. And I can't, I don't want her to be mad at me, And so I just kind of didn't say anything. But what she was referencing is that being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. And what I found out for me, what that means through people like Miss Pauline and Derek and Eric and Jeannie and Stephen and Sunday and all these people, what you guys have taught me is if I would just try to practice all phases of the program the best I can in my life on a daily basis, stay out of the past, stay out of the future, just practice these things on a daily basis. God's going to take care of the rest, man. But I couldn't have believed that, and I didn't believe that when Miss Pauline said that. You can't tell me everything's going to be all right. Bert G came over to my house. Excuse me. He came over to my house in 2016 when I was trying to navigate that criminal case I was up against. I was facing 20 years in prison, and he told me one day, "So I'm gonna come over." So come on, man. Him and another buddy came over, and he said, "I got the answer, Josh." And I'm like, "What is it, dude? What is it?" He said, "Turn to page 86, 87, 88." And then he begins to read Upon Awakening. And I'm like, what? I'm thinking, what is this guy thinking, man? Like, this is dumb, dude. Like, that's not the answer for me. Like, what's he talking about? What he was trying to teach me is you got to live in today, dude. You got to do the best that you can right now, and let all that other stuff go, man. Like, try to do what God wants you to do today. So anyway, 2016, I'm 3 years sober. Never really ever sponsored anybody. And this guy walks into this home group that I was at in Poplarville, Mississippi, and asked me to sponsor him against my will because I didn't want him to, but I did it because I wanted to make sure you guys knew that I was doing this thing right, you know. And I sponsored him, and he saved my life. He saved my life, but because that year that I was trying to, figure out what God wanted me to do in that case, I was pouring into Him. I was pouring into Him. I was allowing myself to be sponsored by a guy by the name of John C. He lives in Las Vegas now, but he was on the coast then. He was an angel in my life, and I sponsored this guy. Good Lord, dude, I'm having a brain freeze right now. Tyler S. One of my best friend's brothers, and he got sober, and he got this deal, was doing the deal, and he ended up stopped doing the deal and passed away. He passed away due to this disease. So I started paying attention, like, man, the people that don't do this work, end up drinking. And you would think that everything would click for me, but it didn't. 2018, 2017, I start living my life again like it was 2001. And I tell myself, well, I'm 4 years sober now. I'm sponsoring somebody. I've really got this thing. I'm going to move. I'm going to find a woman that's going to fix me, We get together and I buy a house, move to Hattiesburg. And I'm going to teach the people of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, how to do AA right. Because after all, I learned how to do AA right on the coast, That's because those people do it right down there, And so, literally, that's my plan. I wouldn't tell anybody that specifically because you would think that I had a big ego, which I did, and which I do, And so that was my plan, and I started doing that, and I became GSR of the Grace Group. And something happened though when we moved in together in 2018. I had another moment of clarity. I've had some significant female relationships in my life, and the women that I had been in these relationships with were completely different. And the woman that I'm married to now was the woman in 2018. She was completely different than the other women that I had significant relationships with. And I found myself having the same exact problems. And this is where God showed up for me, and I didn't even know it. The thought that came to me was, Josh, I wonder why that is. What's the common denominator, And I had been listening to some speaker talks, and I love speaker talks. I always have. They fired me up, and somebody had turned me on to a Spotify account called Mad Dog Recovery way back in 2018, man, before COVID. And I listened to some guys, and I started thinking maybe there's something to that, but like I'm not going to do anything about it. But I started realizing maybe it was me, And so I became GSR of the group, and we're going to therapy, but things still aren't getting better, and I'm sending her off to treatment, and we're having knockdown, drag out fights, and it's wild, man. And thank God for AA though, dude. I mean, I'm GSR of this group. I believe in being of service. That saved me. And right around when 2020 started, something that everybody experienced happened. COVID hit, And that's where my life changed for the better. And I hate to say it that way because I know a lot of us lost people during that time, and I want to be respectful of that. But I believe today, personally, for me, how God shows up, He doesn't allow a bad thing to happen without something good coming from it. I don't think that for me in my life, He causes bad things to happen, and I don't believe that everything happens for a reason. That's just me because that just doesn't feel right for me. But I do believe that He uses human tragedy, man-made tragedy, and brings good from it, man. And so, out of COVID, um, we started this meeting right here. It wasn't my idea. I'd like to take ownership of it, but I can't. I have never had an original idea in my life, really. I'm a master at taking pieces of other people's stuff, mixing it together, and calling it mine. That's what I like to do. And hey, call it what you want, man. But that's what I did. Howard Lowry, God rest his soul, passed away. I'd love to talk to you about him. Derek remembers Howard, Jeannie knows Howard, Stephen knows Howard. I hated Howard's guts when I met him 25 years ago because he was a big book guy, man. And he didn't understand, And I met Howard again, and became somewhat close to Howard in 2018, 2019 in a different light. I wish I had spent more time with him and learned from him. But he started showing me some things. And right around 2020, we're in a big book study together. And man, he said, Josh, why don't you get on this thing called Zoom and start this meeting? I was like, well, crap. Wow, okay. And because he started it, man. He started that one out in Columbia. They meet on Sundays every morning, even right now, back to basics. 11th step meeting. And I said, okay, great. And then I had the thought, I'm going to start a speaker meeting. This is going to help all my group members that are here tonight, and they're going to be impressed with me, and they're going to be impressed with me because I started this thing, and so I'm feeling high on the hog, man. I get to help people and I get to be the savior, right? So as things happened, I became in contact with Ross M. Through Facebook, which was weird because I'd never developed any relationships with people over the phone or through computer. I thought that was lame. I thought that was impossible. What that was indicative of was my limiting idea of God. I feel like God can only come through certain ways, and I learned whenever I was facing that criminal case that I was expecting God to come with a helicopter. He was coming with a boat, and I finally accepted the boat, and so for me, God can speak to me through anything these days, man. And so I was listening to Ross, and he gave me this guy's name and said, "You need to call this guy Victor S. out in Sacramento, California. Ask him to speak for you." So I called Victor, and before I called Victor, I'm like, I got to let Victor know that I'm kind of Mr. AA here in Hattiesburg, And so I called Victor, and Victor he's a very he's real, he's very authentic, and so we're talking. And I'm thinking, man, I got to impress this guy, and I got to tell him, I got to make sure he knows all the stuff I'm doing here, and blah, 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 blah. Well, Victor Victor knew I was full of crap, man. He did, he really did. And started talking to me and was very nice to me and very honest with me. And I found after about a month, I asked him to be my sponsor. He said no, hurt my feelings. But he began to show me stuff in the book, and he's like, Josh, you don't need me to sponsor you, dude. You've been in AA for 20 years. You need to do what the book's telling you, basically. That's kind of what he was telling me. And he put me on to 86, 87, and 88. He put me on to page 164. He said, why don't you go create the fellowship you crave? He said, why don't you go down there to Reloads when they open back up and raise your hand and volunteer to sponsor during the announcements? And I'm like, I can't do that because people don't do that here. The new people have to come to me, They've got to recognize my greatness, and because that's how I was taught, man. I wasn't taught that I'm supposed to go approach the new guy. And maybe there were people out there that were doing that, but that's kind of beneath me, man. And so he began to show me a different way. And I was desperate enough at that time to hear what he was talking about, but because I was stone cold sober and suffering from the bedevilments, he showed me where I was suffering from all that stuff. I was suffering from a spiritual malady, treating it with meetings, treating it with going and talking about my problems in an AA meeting. And while I feel like there's a place for that in certain meetings, I feel like that's a big problem for a lot of places. I just stop it right there, And so I started looking at AA differently, how they were doing it. So I said, okay. And so from 2020 till now, am I still good on time, Jeannie? 10 minutes. Yes. I'm doing better. Used to, I would get all up to the end and I'd have to speed it all up. So 2020, I have not had a long period of time where I wasn't trying to sponsor somebody, like, or somebody having somebody in the steps. Let me tell it to you that way. And what I want to say is this: I learned about myself that if I'm emotionally tied to a certain way of doing things, it's really hard for me to let go of that way of doing things. And what I want to say tonight is this: I like to learn new ways of doing things, man. You know, I used to not, because for some reason I thought that, if you're doing something different, it's working better. Somehow my old way was bad. No, man. What I was doing then worked for me. How I got it worked for me. How I got it with Bert worked for me until it didn't. How I got it with John C. worked for me until it didn't. When I heard the way Victor presented this thing to me, I was like, dang. When I heard the way my current sponsor presented this thing to me, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And so I began to take people looking for sponsees. Let me back up. Victor got me fired up, and I started going to all these online Zoom meetings with heavy hitting big book people, my heroes. Okay. Guys I really respected. And something funny happened because I'm really good at saying things that other people say, so that you'll think that I'm spiritual. Y'all probably never done that before. But I found myself on a primary purpose group meeting in Canada, and my current sponsor was running it, and they asked me to speak, and they recorded, so I had to get ready, because maybe they're recording it. Maybe I'm going to, be somebody, kind of thing, So I prepared all my one-liners, obsessed over it for a while. You know how you do before you talk? You think about it for weeks in advance, what you're going to say, how you're going to affect the masses. And I was just so obsessed with it, I excuse my language, I shit the bed, man. Okay. I wet the bed. And God showed up, man. After the meeting, somebody says, Josh, man, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Our recorder made a mistake and the meeting didn't record. I was like, yes. But through that as well, I met my current sponsor, and I talked to him. And I just said, man, I need some. Will you sponsor me? He's like, sure. And he's like, we'll do it over FaceTime. And I'm like, that's weird. I'm still skeptical, I guess, but I was willing to ask him, because obviously we can't do it face to face because he's in Medicine Hat, Alberta. And but I'd learned enough through Victor that maybe this was time to give it a shot. And so he told me, he said, Josh, there's no magic way to do the steps. There's no magic recipe. There's no magic sponsor. There's no magic group. You're not going to get the right way to do it. You just got to do it. Because that's where I struggle with, man. I like to talk about all the right ways and what I think works best, but like actually doing it regularly, that's where I struggle with. We went through the steps pretty quickly. We met for a couple hours every few days. He didn't read with me in the book, line by line, because we want to get through it quickly. I think that there's a place for that. There's a time for that. I love all that, man. He just said, we need to get you a spiritual experience. You need to go back and you need to do these things. So he showed me how to do inventory out of the book in a little bit different of a way. He did inventory, put me in some amends, and I made some amends that I never thought I'd make. I made some amends surrounding that criminal case that most people in AA, where I was from, said, there ain't no way in hell you need to go make those amends. And they were telling the truth. They weren't leading me astray. He just said, well, why not? Why don't we take those amends through the filter of the book? And if you're familiar with that process where it talks about the 9th step, there's some filters that we can go through. You ask God, you talk to other people, are you willing to go to any lengths? And the thing for me was, I never was willing to make all my amends in the 8th step because I was scared. But he just said, you just got to be willing. God will figure out the rest. So I made some amends surrounding that criminal case, which blew my mind, and the shame and all that stuff fell off me. The esteem came back, man. I started making amends for jobs that I quit in sobriety in the middle of the night. I started stuff years ago. I started making amends for stuff I'd done 25, 30 years ago because I liked the effect produced. He told me, he said, alcoholics drink because the effect produced. You got to do this work because the effect produced. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. I began to see that this pink cloud wasn't a pink cloud because I was newly sober. It was a pink cloud because I was living spiritually. And now I find myself, when I'm not feeling, all warm on the inside, which happens more than I'd like to admit, man. It's because I got something going on that I just need to apply some steps on, man. And thank God for this design for living. Because if this design for living hadn't been here, I wouldn't be able to call Derek with a 10th step. I wouldn't be able to call Tony with a 10th step 2 hours before the meeting and then put me back on track, man. I'd either be lying about how perfect I am right now, or I probably would have texted Eric and say, man, I've come down with a bug. I can't talk. Because that's how I showed up in AA those 11 years, man. When I was depressed, there was something going on with me and I wasn't feeling good, man, there's no way, man, because it's all about me. I didn't understand. I never had that realization that the problem lies within me. I'm not the problem. The problem lies within me, you know. And I'll break my wife's anonymity, dude. I mean, I love that woman, dude. I've put her through so much. When we get in situations where I'm mad at her, it's not her. It's not her, man. It's my inability to practice spiritual principles that, you know, in that situation, man. And that happens a lot, dude. And that's been the story of our marriage. And what I've seen, the more I'm able to treat her and myself like a sick person, the more I'm able to see you as a sick person, the better everybody is, you know. And I don't do that naturally, man. I don't do that naturally. It takes a lot of patience, tolerance, and kindness from you guys to continue to try to butt up against me or with me and be honest with me, you know. I used to be afraid to tell the truth in AA, and sometimes I still am. You know, some of you know me. One of my biggest character defects is that I want you to like me. And going through that process 5 years ago with my sponsor, I realized that's what's affected my entire life. And in the last 5 years, trying to bring that to God and trying to bring that out in the light, my life has changed tremendously. And I could spend an hour about how I could tell you how it's changed tremendously. And I don't tout material things as, you know, God's rewards for living spiritually, but like, dude, I'm a guy who takes the safe route everywhere I go, and I don't risk anything. But because of you guys teaching me how to get linked up with God and how to work this program, I'm part owner of a business, you know, and I've got another business. And I grew up thinking my dad would always say, that's too much. You don't need to do that. That's too, you know, what if it goes under, you know? And so I'm always making decisions based on fear. I began to see how fear has driven me. I've got relationships with all these people in here today, man. I'm able to show up at meetings and be honest. I'm able to walk through my daughter going through some traumatic things 5 years ago and not having a drink, man. I'm able to go back and apologize for things when I mess up. I'm able sometimes to hear the truth about myself, you know. I'm able to encourage others even if I piss you off and be okay with it, man, because I want my desire, my primary purpose today, I truly believe this, and because it's worked for me, is to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And real alcoholics need spiritual experiences daily. So if that means I got to be honest with you and hurt your feelings and disturb your alcoholism, I want to stay in a spot where I can do that, man. And sometimes I don't, but I want to stay in a spot where I'm so linked up with the power of the universe that I don't care what you think. But I love you enough to tell you the truth, man, because I might need you one day to tell me the truth, because I might be on my way out, man. I've seen it so many times. Derek, I mean, people will tell you, if you've been around here a long time, you see people go out with long-term sobriety all the time, man. And why is that? Why is that, man? They stop practicing the spiritual steps, man. I need somebody to slap me across the face and say, Josh, what the hell are you doing? When's the last time you did an inventory? What's your meditation life look like, man? Are you sponsoring anybody? Like, oh crap, I need somebody to do that, man. I need somebody, if I do go back and drink, being able to give me the same message that I gave them so that they'll save my life, or they'll help save my life. We're probably out of time here, and I'm probably out of time. I realize I come off as a little bit evangelistic, but I don't care. I love all of you, even if I don't know you. You guys have saved my life. Dude, I would not be sober. I probably would not be sober today, would be out of AA, had people not told me the truth 5 years ago. I would not be married today because if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous. I wouldn't have the friendships that I have today. So I get a little bit emotional thinking about that, because not everybody gets AA like we do. Not everybody gets exposed to it like we do, man. We're the lucky ones, man. if you're new or if you're old and you've been around a while, all you gotta do is pick up the spiritual tools, man. It's not rocket science. You just gotta be open minded, teachable, and willing. And that's what I gotta stay to be able to stay in the rooms, um, and keep helping folks, man. So that's all I got. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for everybody your support. Love you all. I'm done.